Hi, everyone. Welcome to our discussion on designing behavior change. I'm your interviewer today, Becky Shield from Harmonic Design. A key pillar of our mission at Harmonic is to ensure our clients become more capable of creating and sustaining services that deliver value to all. During this talk, we'll be discussing our design perspective on a recent engagement with a nonprofit organization, RARE. RARE is dedicated to driving social change to benefit both nature and humankind. They approached Harmonic Design with a challenge. How might we use service design tools combined with RARE's expertise in behavioral science to influence people to adopt environmental friendly behaviors? Specifically, this engagement looked at purchasing of carbon offsets, contracting with renewable energy, and adopting a plant-rich diet. I'm really excited to get started with this discussion. Today, we're joined by the team that worked with RARE. We have Stephen Taylor, Head of Design Research, and Service Designer Tucker Witter. Awesome. Excited to chat with you all. Let's get started. Recently, I saw a tweet and it said, service designers like to talk about design, but what about the service? So with that tweet in mind, what service did you design with RARE?
Well, first off, I love the tweet. I'm very for that positioning of service design. I think what we designed with RARE was unique because it wasn't a particular customer-facing service that you might think of when you think of service design. Instead, I think we designed a service within RARE's organization to help them take the knowledge that they had and had accumulated and turn it into services that could be customer-facing one day. So our job was to create a service internally to help them share knowledge and make it more actionable.
Yeah, I think one way this was a service, it's interesting because a lot of times when we think about the main protagonist in a service, we're thinking about a customer, someone who's receiving the service. In this project, and we're starting to see this more and more, it is a company trying to enlist people to provide a service. So we're asking people to change their behaviors in service of humankind and the planet as a whole. So a lot of ways we're having to give people incentives to provide a service rather than to receive it.
Yeah, I think your project is really intriguing. How was this project different from other service design projects you've worked on, since I think the service offering is so different?
It's extremely different. I would say probably the biggest difference was that the possibilities were so vast. Most of the time, the company has a service it already provides, or it wants to extend a new service, and it has a pretty clear idea of where and for whom, and we just have some basic parameters around it. Here, we started with, we would like people to change this behavior. We got to figure out who it is. We got to figure out where this might happen. We have to figure out pretty much everything about it, and we had to determine a lot more variables than we, usually those are provided. We had to set them ourselves in the course of the project.
Yeah, and I think working so closely with behavioral scientists, really deep within their methodologies and bridging them over to service design was something I've never done before. And it was really challenging at some parts, but it was really engaging and really fun to work alongside another industry that has really specific methodologies and ways to extract knowledge.
Yeah, it was interesting even getting to know what the other discipline even did. Like Tucker and I were asking ourselves a lot at the beginning of the project. They have behavioral scientists. Why do they even need us? What can we even contribute to this process? And then it turned out that they could get us pretty far along the way in understanding the conditions that need to be in place in order for behavior change to happen. But in terms of actually shaping those conditions or crafting a particular type of intervention that would make those changes happen, that's where they were able to rely on us more.
I think it's really interesting to combine this with another, I guess, I'm not sure if actually if behavioral science is a social science, but with other methods, maybe. I wanted to ask, how did you shape your methods to them? Did it make you think differently about how you approached and what methods you used in working with them?
Yes, very much. What ended up being sort of the red thread through the entire project were psychosocial states. So in order to affect a behavior change, there's certain beliefs and attitudes that you try to shift in the person whose behavior you're trying to change. And so they were able to identify those, and we were able to use them in multiple points through the project. Normally what we'll do is try to look at an existing experience, understand where there's opportunities to improve it, because we didn't have an existing experience to change. And we didn't, like I said earlier, where we could do it and how we could do it was not predefined at all. We ended up relying on these psychosocial states and use them to identify opportunities to shift these psychosocial states and get these behaviors to change.
Yeah, and I like to think that it really shows the adaptability of design, and service design in particular, to be able to use something as abstract as psychosocial states to jump off of as its starting point in that design process. So I think it speaks really volumes to the work that service design can do.
Can you give me an example of a psychosocial state that I think would draw us?
Right.
I think it's still really abstract, so I'm trying to.
Yeah, so one would be like with respect to a plant-rich diet. An example I think we had was, I believe others in my reference network, my social circle, the people whose opinions I care about, are eating less meat. Or another one would be, I believe people in my reference network think I ought to be eating less meat.
Okay, cool. So I think, you mentioned how interesting it is to work with these psychosocial states and these other approaches that behavioral scientists brought. Was there any part of this engagement that stood out to you, including that, but outside of that as well?
I think some of the more surprising things for me is how language was really affected, or when we were doing research, how language was being used by our participants in terms of how they viewed like healthy or green behaviors and how they viewed their own behaviors. I think what we learned is that some people, most people are like walking contradictions. And it's really interesting what environments and what states, that's why these psychosocial states are so important, is that they're really context driven. And I think understanding how people respond and react in certain environments makes them open to creating habits around behaviors.
Yeah. So well, that's really interesting. What were some other interesting things that maybe surprised you during this research or you experienced during this project?
I'd say, this is kind of related to what Tucker was talking about, but we did find that framing of behaviors did make a really big difference in reaching people across political divides.
Mm.
So when we were talking to people about carbon offsets, the climate change part of it was extremely persuasive to people who are sort of on the left leaning end of the political spectrum. When we started talking about the other benefits that of the things, the types of projects that remove carbon from the atmosphere, we started talking about planting trees, protecting forested areas, and it became less of a conversation about climate science and became more a conversation about nature and protecting nature. We started seeing people, a surprising range of people gravitating toward the same types of interventions.
Great. Tucker, anything surprise you during this process?
I think other than some of the more journey specific stuff, I think what was surprising to me, coming from having sort of a science background, was how service design and its methodologies really can align with the scientific method. I think something that I learned from Stephen is that design research can be just as rigorous as people view maybe the scientific method's way of asserting itself. And I think our rigor and our research, I learned from this project, came from kind of this repetition of testing these things, making hypotheses and testing them over time, and seeing how people responded to them and making those edits and coming back. I think it was a big surprising journey for me of learning how to apply design research to something as scientific or as structured as the scientific method.
Yeah, did you, going through this process, you mentioned how the words could be polarizing based on the political views. Did you all iterate or make any changes to how you presented the research or anything from that based on what you learned from that?
Well, we changed the whole name of one of the journeys. The carbon offsets journey became the nature projects journey as a result of our findings.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then I'm always really curious about how design and research shapes not only the project, but individuals. And I know, Steve, when I was talking to you and you said you're now looking at your diet differently. So I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about that. And then Tucker, if you have any interesting personal changes that you've looked at as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we've in my house, we've cut down meat quite a bit. We did friends and family recruiting, so I got to interview both of my daughters on different journeys, and my older daughter is joining us in cutting back pretty drastically on meat. And I'm also being a lot nicer, in fact, more appreciative of vegetarians. I even sometimes thank people for being vegetarians because I know they're actually benefiting me, not just their health. So changed my attitude on that quite a bit.
Cool. Tucker,
Yeah.
are you vegetarian? Does he thank you?
Not yet, but my recipe bank has grown very much with plant-rich foods, and I've tried so many different vegetables outside of that. But I think outside of the plant, I think I've been sort of the diet stuff. I think I've been focusing a lot on how much my individual actions, how much of an impact they might even have, and how much of a say I can have in those. I think just driving to the supermarket or buying something off of the internet, I think a lot more about what the environmental impact for those things are. And sometimes you can't change those things. Sometimes they're out of our hands. But I think just getting that awareness more about my everyday life and some of those actions to the environment has been really eye-opening to me. I haven't bought an electric vehicle or anything yet, but I'll consider it.
I think what's really cool about this project is we're able to talk about it. So much of our work we're not allowed to talk about. And then what else? You all made these amazing guides and casebooks to share, and they're Creative Commons. You both worked on that. What are some of those things that people can look for in those casebooks?
Well, we designed it deliberately to appeal to multiple audiences. So we're speaking both to people who are interested in the causes. So anyone who picks up one of these books and they're interested in carbon offsets or plant-rich diets or renewable energy, they'll find some ideas on things that can be done to advance those causes. But it's also written for method geeks, both service designers as well as behavioral scientists. So we tried to go back and forth between talking about the subject matter that we were concerned with, as well as how we were approaching the work itself. So, and that was an interesting continuation. Earlier, you asked about things that were unusual about this project. One of the things I thought was really unusual was that we were thinking in that two-sided way the whole way through. We were self-consciously inventing a reusable method, and we were also doing multiple journeys and trying out different things to try to refine that method, which added some complication. There was a lot of subject matter expertise that we had to absorb in order to become fluent in what we were doing, but not just around the different behaviors we wanted to change, but we also had to learn a lot of behavioral science, and we had to invent this method all at the same time and do the work. So it was a real brain workout.
Yeah, I think making something repeatable is part of a service designer job, and it's also a very hard task. Sorry, Tucker, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say I agree with everything that Stephen's saying. I think hopefully people, when they read this, can see themselves either in the storyboards as the individual or a company or an organization helping out. Because I think what we found from our research is that changing these behaviors is going to take a lot of different interconnected organizations and services, and hopefully people see a piece of themselves in these case books and see where they could potentially have action in these journeys.
Yeah, I'd love it if people who are in the behavior change business, like people in public health, found some new possibilities for solving some of the problems they're tackling when they read it.
Yeah, that's great. It's a really great angle. I know I've worked so many organizations where we've tried to incentivize these behaviors, and I think there's a lot of interesting readers that we can reach. All right, awesome, very exciting. Thanks to Stephen and Tucker for sharing their insights in designing behavior change. The outcomes are free to download on Rare. They are used in Creative Commons. We also will post them on our site. Thank you for joining us, and be well.
Thanks.